Welcome to Naperville Notables. I'm Liz Spencer. We're doing something different today. We're on location at the DuPage Children's Museum. We're inside the building and we're talking with Sarah Orleans, and we're finding out how they're recovering from their disastrous flood earlier this year. We've had a harsh and a cold winter, but for you and the DuPage Children's Museum, it was a little harsher than normal, more than you bargained for. So tell me what happened on January 8th.
Well, it actually starts the day before, January 7th. We were closed on January 7th and January 8th because the weather was absolutely freezing and children were being advised to stay inside, so we were respecting that and weren't open, although as staff we were all here working. And we had decided January 9th, no matter what the weather was, if it was even 1 degree warmer, we were going to open because so many parents were housebound and ready to get outside or into a warmer place that wasn't their home. So I got up bright and early, 7:30 in the morning, and my phone is dinging, which means I have a text. And I look at my phone, and the heading reads, "We won't be opening to the public today." And there's a video attached. And what I couldn't even figure out what I was looking at, but it literally looked like a stream was running through where we're sitting. And from all of the light fixtures and all down the walls, water is just pouring. My husband, what a trooper, I said, "Sweetie, I think we've had a flood at the museum." And he said, "You go ahead and get there, I'll bring the shop back." Good guy. And so I race to the museum. I come inside. There's about 5 of us standing around in up to the top of our shoes in some areas in water. Called my husband, "Don't worry about the shop vac." And what had happened, we finally figured out. It took us some time to find where the source was, but on the top floor of the museum there was a pipe, 1/2 inch, small little pipe that went to a sink from years ago, probably when Mosier was here, and it had been soldered and capped, but it had still water attached to it. And over the years, that pipe, which is on an outside wall, was shrinking a little bit, and the cap wasn't because it was inside. Shrinking, expanding, really good science project, shrinking, expanding, and it blew the cap off. And what they estimated is about 6 gallons a minute or more of water was shooting at high pressure out of that for about 12 hours in the museum. So that's how we ended up with the river. In the main floor of the Children's Museum, and standing in the midst of it all, you're kind of wondering, who do you call first?
Yeah, what was your reaction?
We called our cleaning service, actually, which ended up being a godsend. And they introduced us to an incredible company, Spectrum, which is sort of a disaster relief, and that's what they specialize in. And for us, it was a great fit. They were here within probably 3 or 4 hours. They brought in giant sucking machines that sucked everything, all the water, and began a process that would end up taking over a month because it was getting all of the water out of everything. As you can look around, the drywall has all had to be cut up because anywhere where the water had gotten in, you had to get rid of it if it hadn't officially dried in 4 days. And so a lot of the exhibits, because it was board inside of plexi, the water had gotten inside. So all of those exhibits were a loss. All of the walls had to be, as you can see, cut up about 1.5 feet, and all of that would have to be replaced. But that process from January 9th till sometime really in early February was a process of bringing in environmental teams, making sure there was no mold, which was the dreaded word that we were all fearing. And the museum will never be cleaner, is what I keep telling everyone. If there was ever a sign of mold, it has long been gone. It's gone. There's no mold anywhere in the building. The entire HVAC system, the heating and air conditioning, has been completely cleaned out in a way. It was like having your arteries cleaned out. It just, everything had to be cleaned. And that took a really much longer than anyone expected, a long time. And then became the process of all the flooring had to be taken up, because underneath of it is a kind of compound that can't be, it breaks down when it gets that soaking wet for that long. So that took weeks again, and all of this was happening behind these ominous plastic walls that they had set up with these huge signs, do not go beyond this point. So we didn't even know quite how bad everything was until some of that plastic came down. We were able to go through the museum and begin to take account of everything that we had lost in the flood. So I think our original estimates were very optimistic. Somehow we imagined we would open in April. Since they didn't even get out of here officially till the end of February, after they did a lot of their cleaning of everything, we knew that the date would have to change significantly.
Wow. Now, how did you feel when you walked in? And how did your staff? I mean, it had to be overwhelming and heartbreaking and all of it.
I'm laughing because, that didn't hit the first minute that
Right.
you walked in. The first minute you walked in, you're just like, wow, what am I even looking? I can't even imagine, water's dripping from every light fixture, water falls down the walls. And the first thought I had was, I hope it flooded the air and water exhibit because that was slated to be replaced this year. And so we ran over to the air and water, and lo and behold, it was in perfect condition.
Of course it was, right, yeah.
It was like not a drip of water anywhere in that exhibit space at all, for lots of reasons. But that was untouched, but everything else was soaked. And I think what happened is over the first days, it's like any disaster. You're focused on, okay, let's get clean, let's get the insurance company in here. Everybody had purpose. Then the realities began to hit, that the insurance company, of course, isn't going to let you keep in a full staff of people,
Right.
although they will reimburse you for the cost of keeping things going. In the interim, they're not going to let you keep as many staff on board who have no work to do because there's no public to serve. And so that became very difficult, to have to make very hard choices about who we would have to let go and who we would keep. And the keeping became focused on who had the greatest diversity of talent so that they could wear many different hats. They could help clean, they could help build, they could help organize an off-site location. And so those things that was the moment where a profound emotional sadness began to really kick in of the loss, not just to what it would mean for families not having the Children's Museum all winter when you need it the most, but the loss of really valuable people who we just love and are part of our family here. And that was quite devastating.
I bet, and something that you probably didn't think about as you took on this new role as executive director. You have been here less than a year.
Yep.
And it's been a big couple of months.
And actually, I think the flood happened that weekend. I think was the weekend that they flew me in a year ago if I was interested in taking on this great project. And it wasn't what I bargained for, actually.
No.
Sadly, I'm going to tell you a story you're not going to believe, which is, I've been through this before. As unbelievable as that is, I founded a museum in New Jersey, the Garden State Discovery Museum, and on Martin Luther King's birthday, the one and only tornado ever in New Jersey decided to literally almost touch down on top of the Children's Museum. It lifted the roof, blew out a wall, and flooded much of the area. So yeah, I was not ever, once in your life is plenty to have been through something like that. And the only positive of having been through it before that I can say with absolute certainty is I know how much better we were when we reopened. And I've really held that, and I've held that for our staff, that this is traumatic, this is crazy, this is not what any of us wanted to do, but I know that we will be better, we will be stronger when we reopen. And that's, due so much to the team. We call them Team Recovery, who've stayed on and are 100% focused on helping us get rebuilt.
It does seem very ironic that,
almost to the same weekend.
Almost
That's even stranger.
Right, almost the same weekend. Right, yeah, right. So, but the right person at the right place for a tough job. So that seems to be you. But one of the things I think that you have done that's been very smart is to take up outside residency to keep
Yeah.
over at the mall. And so tell me a little bit about how that idea came about, and how's it working, and will it stay?
Wow. Well, I'll tell you, the idea came to me 5 days because I had done something very similar with the Garden State Discovery Museum, was to try to figure out how to find another spot that you could reopen and keep your presence in the community and be there for your members and be a place to answer questions about what happens to your membership and when you're closed and all of that. So I worked a lot with Christine Jeffries to originally try to find a spot here in Naperville, and had sort of identified, but there was just nothing that was coming up. And I can't remember exactly the day now. It was a remarkable day. I got a phone call from Scott Sampson out at the Fox Valley Mall. He's the general manager, member of the museum, and he happened to be walking through one of his stores that had recently closed, a beautiful children's clothing store with beautiful hardwood floors and our colors. And he just put two and two together, and he said, wow, this looks like the Children's Museum. We should invite them over. And so he made a call, and we managed to connect. And I think about 14 days later, we opened the Fox Valley Mall. We call it DCM at the mall. Mm-hmm. And for us, it's been a huge success in terms of just, it gave us something very powerful to work for at a time we could not do anything here other than begin to build an exhibits team that would be replacing the exhibits. But it gave all of us this energy and purpose to be out at the mall. What was incredible, which was the bonus that we didn't expect, was a whole new audience of people who we were introduced to.
Right.
Families, multi-generational families that come to the mall, who found us and are now, will, I'm sure, become members and visit us here in Naperville. You asked the really $100,000 question.
Well, it
it's
seems
probably
like
a lot more than $100,000 question.
Seems like a nice fit in many ways.
It is. There's something wonderful about the idea of serving an audience in another community as an outgrowth of what we do here in Naperville. And there are many people who are interested in us staying there. It's a matter of doing a really good feasibility study. You know, how does it sustain itself? You can't charge admission there.
Right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't give us this glorious space for almost nothing,
right,
or for nothing. They see the benefit. They want us there. We want to be there, but we would have to get it funded.
Yeah.
And our focus right now is getting everything funded here. That's the key. But at the same time, having meetings with Scott and with other people there, and with donors who I think may have an interest in us having more of a presence in Aurora. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Am I allowed
That's
to say stay tuned?
You are allowed to say
Okay.
stay tuned, because we're going to talk about another couple of dates. Now, the public has been waiting for this current space to open, and a couple of dates have been tossed, but then they, as you said, it's once you're starting to peel back what's happened, you're getting some more of a reality check or some surprises, because this is an old building. This is the original Moser Lumberyard.
And that's the good. There's actually good news there.
Okay.
I'll tell you, this is where you want to be if a tornado hits. We had the city's engineer came through, and those were his exact words. He said, "This is where you want to be." He said, "The building is so secure." So the building itself is really preserved. It wasn't damaged in the flood. It was the pieces of the museum, the infrastructure, the walls, and the exhibits. And part of the date moving had to do with, we didn't realize how much of the flooring was going to have to be replaced. That was sort of a huge eye-opening shock. But you realize you can't replace it in one area, and a place right next to it, you know, you can't even buy this flooring anymore. And the company is unfortunately in England. Now, they have been incredible, and they said the minute we've picked the new color, they'll have it here in 6 weeks. That's going to be the beginning of the process, which is getting the walls all finished, then getting the flooring in, and at the same time, simultaneous, we're not going to open exactly as we were. Creativity Connections, which is where we're sitting, was slated next year to be refurbished and reimagined in a lot of ways. So we've discussed that with the insurance company, and they're saying once we establish the costs of what it would take to replace what you had, that money is yours to redesign and rethink how you want to redo that space. And so that's what we've decided to do. So a lot has happened in 14 years since, or about 10 years since this has opened. We've learned a lot. We've learned about what worked, what we loved about it. So that it's this fine balance of keeping what's familiar, and so that when children come, it feels familiar, some of their favorite things are here, but having these wonderful surprises that are going to happen. Beautiful new spaces. We're thinking differently about lighting and how we want it. That's one of the complaints we have sometimes. It's very dark in here on a nice day. So how do we bring in more natural light? And all of those are the areas that we're working on right now. We hope to have that wrapped up in the next couple of weeks. And then we had to identify exhibit houses. It's a big project. We lost so many things, and so many things had to be refurbished that no one exhibit house could take the entire project and get us open by summer, which is our goal. It's not a goal anymore. It's officially the date now. Is that we know it'll be summer. The plan is to open with everything.
Okay, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, that I was pretty immovable on that, and I was not letting me get talked off of that marker, which is we're going to open complete, and we don't want to do it in stages.
Why not?
Part of it is here's my marker of success for this, and it's maybe will sound a little odd. But the marker for success is for people to walk in the building and never think about the flood, ever, never be talked about, never think about it.
I can see that.
They're going to walk in and it'll be like grand opening day. And if that takes us a week or two longer, that's worth doing. Because to have, for any family, any child to walk in and say, oh, my favorite exhibit isn't here anymore, or this is gone, you want it to be this wonderful resource that we were on January 8th.
Yeah.
January 8th, we were an amazing museum. I'm just honored to be here in Naperville and running this museum. I traveled many miles to come here to be part of this museum. I just love it. We want to return to that, that we were the day before, and better.
And better. I like that.
I think that's our goal. And so, on most days, if you catch me at the right time of the day, 98% of this is going to be okay. We're all going to be fine. The 2% that weighs huge and is emotional is the human part of that, and the cost that it's, cost us all. Those of us who have stayed and are working 20 hours a day, and thinking about it and staying up at night and trying to figure that out. And then the cost of losing really valuable people who we want to go on and get their lives going because we were closed for so long.
Right, because they have to pay for
they
life.
They have to have their life, and they have to do the right thing for themselves and their families. So I'm looking forward to opening day and never talking about the flood again. That's
awesome. I think people sometimes don't give the Children's Museum enough credit, or why is it important to have one? So tell me a little bit, as you are looking at the exhibits, what does this bring? This is more than a museum. This is important for child development. So tell me a little bit about what your thought is with child development and as you're building this new museum.
Okay, really great question, actually. Museums, I've told these stories before, but I'll be really short. They have this long history where they started as these places that I think of these wonderful women who kind of came together and they'd come up with this idea, let's take all our collections and let's put them in museums because kids would love to see them. That's how a lot of museums started. This one is so different. This was founded by just two remarkable women, and just what an amazing legacy for this museum. One was an early childhood educator, and one was a person who was passionate about places for family, and also was a preschool teacher and early childhood educator. And the two of them came together with one thought in mind, which is one that I deeply share, which is children's museums aren't just for children. They're a place for anyone who's interested in how children learn. And that can be parents and teachers and providers of all kinds who are curious about how children learn. And so the museum is very intentional about thinking about a space. there are a lot of museums where you go in and there's a kitchen or there's a grocery store. I'm allowed to talk about that because I ran those museums. I know what those museums are like, and they're amazing. This museum had a very different thought. It was based on constructivism, this idea of constructivist learning, that children enter a space with their own thoughts and their own ideas. How do we keep that experience open-ended, meet them where they are, and they bring the learning to that experience? They're building on these ideas. And a museum like that looks different than the museum that has a grocery store and all those wonderful kinds of experiences. It has wonderful open-ended experiences where parents, I like to think of it, and I see it happening here a lot, where the parent is sitting at the table with their child with some activity. They're like, oh, I never thought of that. And I love when a parent begins asking questions, begins wondering with their child. I wonder how that happens. I wonder what happened if we did this or we did that. It's a very different experience for a lot of parents where we often think we have to have all the answers. I like to think of this as a place that's a provocation for asking those questions that are helping your children scaffold their own thinking about how the world works. All of us know that it's in discovering something that we learn best.
Absolutely.
I don't know about you, but that was certainly my childhood. It was, I thought I was going to be a paleontologist because I discovered fossils. I was the first person, I'm quite sure, that ever discovered fossils.
I'm sure you were, right. At least on your block, maybe.
And my parents bought me this little hammer and hook or a little geological pick, and went outside digging them up as the first person. And now I know a lot about fossils, but I know a lot about learning and about constructing your own meaning and your own learning, which is what we know and how we know children learn best.
Right. Well, this place certainly has been, as a visitor, as an adult visitor, just the amazing, how clever it is, how engaging it is to everybody, whether you're 5 or you're 45 or 85. So it's just engaging to everybody. To your point, it's a family experience. So as we think about that, and we think about making it stronger than before, your mantra, your marching orders, what can the public do? How are you funding this? How are you moving forward to do this? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay, that's a really good question. I'm going to back up a little bit if I can. One of the things I don't want to forget is that although the museum closed, all of our outreach, our professional development, our play to learn, there's sort of what I think of in a museum is there's the visible and there's the invisible. The visible part of the museum is what 320,000 visitors experience when they come here on a regular basis. The invisible is what you don't see when you're here, but are the experiences that we have developed for educators and for school groups outside the museum, where we serve 80 to 100,000 people outside the museum as well. Those programs are continuing while we're closed. That staff is fully on board and doing their job.
That's great.
So every day our vans are all over the community serving the public, because there are so many people in schools and in libraries and in programs that are also interested in the way the Children's Museum approaches early childhood education. And we feel, and that's one of our areas of greatest growth, is in doing more professional development for people interested in learning more about hands-on learning like this.
That's awesome.
So, but how are we going to pay for everything? That's the $100,000 question again.
Probably
in this case, it's about a $3 million question.
I was going to say, I think it's a little bit more.
But luckily, not luckily, smart planning, I'm going to give it that instead. Great insurance, really good insurance broker here in town who identified a company, and we have the kind of insurance you need in a disaster like this, which is replacement insurance. So everything that was destroyed will be replaced to something new. And that was a really important part of that. It's not depreciated in the way. It's all very complicated.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it's something I knew a lot about from the other experience.
Yes.
Not worth boring the details. The important thing is we do have the insurance. But there are things, as I said, that are not covered by the insurance because those are additions that we'll do. We may not want to put the wall back exactly that way. Now that it's down, we may want to enlarge it or take it down or use a different material. And so a lot of the fundraising efforts have been in helping what I consider filling the gap. It helped fill the gap currently before the insurance began paying us. It allowed us to have money to pay staff and to pay the bills and keep the lights on and all those things. All of that had to happen before the first checks began to come from the insurance company. I don't know if any of you have ever had a disaster in your home, but it's not like they show up with a checkbook.
Nope, cash flow's a problem, right?
So with cash flow, that's been amazing. So we have raised between the mall, which is we're doing on a donation-only basis, pay what you will, we call it, or make a donation. And through incredible generous donors, we've raised probably close to $80,000. We have a $50,000 challenge grant that came from MacArthur Foundation. They said, how can we help? We want to support you in this time. We fund all of your programs. We'd like to additionally give you money. And we asked them for this challenge grant that we could challenge the public to say, help us match this. They gave us $50,000. We've raised, this was just very recently, we've already raised $10,000. Some of our members and families have reached out, and we have until April 15th to raise the rest of it.
Is there going to be a new campaign that when you open these doors, will there be a new fundraising campaign that goes with it?
That was what we were trying to avoid, is that so many people stepped in and wanted to help and support us right in the beginning. We also had a campaign underway to redo, as I said, our water and air exhibit. It's called Awesome Energy.
Right.
We've designed a beautiful new water table and incredible new air exhibits and experiences. And we did all the prototyping last summer for that and are underway. So that campaign was already well underway. Our goal was to open, never think about the flood again, and resume all of our fundraising efforts on Awesome Energy, because that's a very significant project. In the meantime, you know, as I said, insurance covers what's called business interruption, which is a complicated formula. Couldn't even tell you. But it's a complicated piece that we're working out, but it will cover the cost of the money that the museum was earning. The museum was doing very well. December 30th, when we ended the first half of the year, was when our year ends, begins in July.
Right.
We were on track, 100%. We had really gotten our expenses in a good place and under control, and we were earning the revenue we need and getting the gifts we needed to be able to continue being successful. So I think that was the double blow of January 8th. Was I'd like to have seen how the whole year would have landed, but it looked different, and when we open this summer, we're going to start all over again with the growth that we had underway.
Well, I am very confident under your leadership they will do that. I think, again, right person, right place at a really tough time, but here you are. So welcome to Naperville, and thanks for all you do, and keep us posted.
I will. Thanks. Thank you for having me. This is such a great opportunity to tell the story, and I'm sure I've left holes, and people can call me and reach out to me and I said the only thing I ask is no more Monday morning quarterbacking.
Yes.
You're not allowed to go back
you have to
and
go
say
forward.
You would have done that differently, because the information you get and the information you're working with are the decisions we're making every day. So help me move forward. You know, what are the ideas that people have for helping us move forward?
That's a great place to be. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.